Kesubos Daf Vase contains two primary sugyas. The first is a continuation of a discussion of a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about what happens when someone writes on a shtar that I owe you money and gives it to someone, but it's not signed. It gives it in front of witnesses. Then we'll bring proofs to that. Then we'll get into the topic of a shtar that is also not signed that records how much each member of a wedding party is going to give to the younger couple. So let's begin. We've seen machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. A situation where somebody writes on a piece of paper, I owe you money. He's admitting that there's a previous chov, but he's not speaking it out. He's just writing it down. He did not sign it, and he gave it to the person that it says that he owes money to in front of witnesses. The fact that it's given in front of witnesses, does that count as a valid creation of a chov? The crux of the issue is an unsigned shtar, does that create a chov? And that's what we're going to be seeing proofs to. So we've already seen one proof, and then the Gemara brings another one, and then the Gemara wants to say that's a machlokes tanaim. So the first proof, we are 5 lines into the daf, is if somebody has a son that is firstborn and he needs to do a pidyon haben, and he takes a shtar, he takes a piece of paper, and he writes on it, I owe 5 slime, that's the amount that you give for pidyon haben. He writes on it, I owe 5 slime to so-and-so who is a Kohen, and he gives it to him. So the lachat, the Mishnah says, is that he has to give him the 5 slime, and even if he pays that 5 slime, it does not work as pidyon haben. So clearly the Gemara, this Mishnah is paskening that writing on a piece of paper that I owe you and giving it creates a new chov. If it was the old chov of pidyon haben, there's no reason that it shouldn't work for pidyon haben when he pays it. Obviously, this is creation of a new chov, and when he pays it, it has nothing to do with the pidyon haben chov, and it's totally separate. And that is a proof to the opinion of Rav Yochanan, who says when you write down on a piece of paper that you owe somebody money, and even if you don't sign it, it still creates a chiv, it still creates an obligation. So Mar says that Reish Lakish will say that it's not a kasha at all. What happened over here actually is that here it works to create a chov because it's a 5, because it's a chov d'oraisa. To give 5 slime is a 5 slime d'oraisa. What is writing down is the chov d'oraisa. Since it's a pre-existing chov d'oraisa, that works. Now the Gemara explains, what did he write it for if it's already an existing chov? He wrote it just to say that I'm going to give it to this Kohen and not to a different Kohen. He was reserving a Kohen for himself. Now, why, if he pays it, is it not count as pidyon haben? If this is, the whole shtar was really just to record the pidyon haben chov, which is what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara says because there's a gzeira d'Rabbanan that it shouldn't work, because if you give a shtar to a Kohen that you're trying to do pidyon haben to, people are going to think that you can pay pidyon haben with a shtar. If somebody owes you money, you could take that IOU and give it to the Kohen and say, hey, this is monetary value. That should work for a pidyon haben. Now that does not work. In order to prevent people from thinking that, we don't allow you to give a shtar, and that the payment of that shtar either should create an effective pidyon haben payment. All right, now the Gemara says, Rava says that this is actually a machlokes tanaim. It's machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. If somebody writes an IOU on an unsigned shtar, does that create a chiv or not? It's a machlokes tanaim. Where is that? So that's the case of an arev. An arev is a guarantor, somebody who didn't borrow money, but he guarantees someone else's loan, that if that person can't pay, he's going to pay. And here you have a guarantor who signed after the signature of the witnesses on the original loan document. That means that his recording that he's the arev is not signed. There's no signature on that. Now that's very similar to our case where we're talking about a creating of a chov which is not signed. Now what's the halach over there? So over there, Rabbi Yishmael says it's a milva al peh, but it's collectible. He has to pay it. If the malva comes to this arev and tries to collect, he has to pay it. But because it's al peh, because it's not signed, he can't take from the chasim mishubadim. He can't take from property that he had sold. He can't take that away from the buyer. He can only take from free land that is owned by the arev. Now that's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. The Gemara says that Ben Nanis is also a Tana. He disagrees. And Menana says there is no chov here at all. Cannot take from free land, can't take from mishubadim land, can't take from anything. Now, the Mishnah asks why, and the Mishnah and Benanis responds with an interesting phrase. He said, if somebody's choking he's choking someone else in the market because he owes him money, he's trying to extort it from him, somebody else comes and says, all right, let him go, I'm going to pay you. Does he have to pay? So he doesn't have to pay. And the reason is because this is coming after the signatures on the original loan. This is an addendum to the original loan, which is not included in the original loan. It's not on the signed document. Meaning, Benanis is coming to say you cannot add on to an existing signed loan and have an obligation. If you try to tack something on to an existing loan as an Arev, does not make you a valid Arev. Anyway, so the Gemara's point is that Benana seems to clearly be holding that there is no chiyuv created by adding on al peh, by adding on without signatures, and Rabbi Shmuel says that there is a chiyuv. So Rabbi Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yochanan, Benana holds like Rish Lakish. So the Gemara answer is no, and this is very different because this is arvos. This is not the same as creating an original loan or an original chov or admitting to an existing loan chov. This is arvos. Arvos is something which exists deraisa. The Torah talks about an arev. Ran Yehuda said, "Anochi arvenu miyadi tevakshenu." He said he became an Arev. You see the concept of Arvis Deraisa. Therefore, there is a Deraisa force behind it, and it's something which you can create just by signing. It's interesting because an Arev never gets anything. There is no kinyan that makes him chayiv. He becomes chayiv just by saying, I'm going to be the Arev. So therefore, to just create an Arvus without a signature, that is much stronger and much more likely to happen, much more likely to be true that could happen than that you can create an actual chov, Baal Peh, or an ashtar without signatures. Therefore, the fact that Benanis over here says that this does not work and it does not create the chov, there is no way that fits with Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you can create a chov even on a regular chov. Because if this chov deraisa you can't create, certainly a regular chov you would not be able to create at all. However, Rish Lakish could say that Rabbi Yishmael agrees with him, and that is that even though Rish Lakish generally holds that you cannot create a chov, here Rabbi Yishmael says you do create a chov, and that's because Rabbi Yishmael holds that this is because there's Arvos here, and Arvos is different, and therefore Rish Lakish could very easily fit into both opinions. He can fit into Benanis who holds you can never create a chov, and can fit into Rabbi Shmuel, even though he says here you could create a chov, that's because it's an arvus, which is a chov deraisa, and he would agree to Rish Lakish you cannot create a regular chov loan that is not arvus related. Gemara now refers to our second sugya, which is something which was mentioned briefly at the top of Daf Kuf Beis in the first few lines, which we did as part of Daf Kuf Aleph. So there we saw that Rav Gidl says when you have the mechutanim get together and decide how much each one is going to give the new young couple, the chassan and the kala, so that is koneh. That is an obligation which is created al peh, just by speaking it out. So we quote Rav Gidl again, say the name of Rav, so when they say how much are you going to give, and he says an amount, and the other one says how much are you going to give, and he says an amount, and then they do the kiddushin, that kinyan is chal, and the obligation is chal, and everybody has to pay, and this is Dvarim haniktim ba'amira. It's a kinyan that happens just by saying I'm going to give it. Now, Rava comments on this. Rava says that you may think that it's logical to say that this halacha is only true if the girl is a nara, because if the girl is a nara, then the father is getting her kesef kedushin. Therefore, when the father promises to give something, it's in exchange for that kesef kedushin, and because it's a deal, it's a trade, it's chal. However, you may say that she's a bogeres, where the father is not getting anything out of it. The fact that he promises to give something is not chal. It's not chal a kinyan just by saying that. Says Rava, it's not true. He says ha'lekim. He says by God, it's not true. Even by a bogeres, the kinyan is still chal, even just by speaking it out, and there's no backsies. How do you know that? Because it's chal on the father of the chassan. Father, the chassan is not getting anything out of it, and yet it's chal on him too. So certainly it should work for the bogeres as well. Now, what's the reason? The reason is because of the hana that their child is getting married, and somebody's willing to have his child marry yours. That's enough of a hana that to make a kinyan be chal. The Gemara now asks the question. Ravina asked Rav Ashi, can you write this arrangement down in a shtar? This would be what we call shtari pesikta, a document that records what the obligation of each side is to the couple. What's the issue? The issue is if it's written down, you may end up collecting from the chasam mishubadim. You have a shtar that says this amount is owed, and then they don't give it, though the couple can come and collect from property that the mechutanim sold. And the question is, you're really not supposed to collect from the chasam mishubadim because it's really a chov al peh. It's really something that was just created orally. You're just writing it down afterwards. So this is a question that Ravina asked Ravashi, and he said it should not be written down. It's not the kind of thing that could be written down. It can't be collected from chasam mishubadim. So the Gemara has a kasha on that. A few kashas on it. First of all, we saw in our last Mishnah that when a man and woman get married and he undertakes to support her daughter, she has a daughter from a previous marriage. So in order to make sure that he doesn't end up stuck supporting the daughter, even if she gets divorced from him and marries someone else, so we said that the pikrin, the smart ones, should write that I'm only going to support your daughter as long as you marry to me. And then it said, but we said there that he should write it. Now that obligation is an obligation that's part of the marriage arrangements. So you see that this is still an amount that's being created by a verbal obligation, and it says that he could write it down in a shtar. So obviously you are allowed to write these things down. So Gemara says no, when it says he should write it, just means that's what he should say. He shouldn't actually write it. So Gemara says, do you ever use the word koisev and you mean to speak? Gemara says, yeah, we have a mission that says a koisev l'ishtei didn't run. Somebody writes for his wife, I don't have any tightness on your property, I don't have any claim on your property. That works, and we saw that Rebbe Chia says that that's really where he's saying it. He's not actually writing it. Okay, so you do see such a thing. Okay, now the Gemara goes to its second proof. We have a mission that says you're not allowed to write shtori erisin or nisuin unless it's with the knowledge of both the kala and the chasim. So the Gemara says so clearly, if it is with your knowledge, you could write it down. So shtori erisin, what does that mean? Probably it means the arrangement of who pays what. The Gemara says no, that's not what it means. It means an actual shtar they're using for kiddushin. You know that you could do kiddushin bekesef b'shtar ubevia. So this is the shtar that you want to use. It's the actual shtar that says that you're going to be married to him. Now, that can only be written midaita. It can only be written with their knowledge and with their agreement. That itself is a machlekes amoraim. It's Rav Papa and Rav Sharavia against Rabba and Ravina. Rav Papa and Rav Sharavia say that if you wrote it without, even if you wrote a lishma, but it was written without the consent of the girl, then it doesn't work. It's got to be that it's written with consent. And therefore, this Mishnah, according to this explanation, is reflecting that opinion. Next, the Gemara goes back to our Mishnah for another proof, and that's the Mishnah where we had seen over there that if a man marries a woman and he promises to support her daughter from a previous marriage, and then he has his own daughter. The way the Mishnah had it, there's even a second husband who has the same promise as a later husband, and he also has his own daughter, and both these two men, they die, so the children are being supported from their property. So the halacha is that the daughter of the wife who has received the promise to be supported, she can collect even from nechassim mishubadim because the promise to her creates a chov, and a chov collects even from nechassim mishubadim. However, the men's own daughters, they can only collect from nechassim b'nei chorin because that's like Yerusha, and that doesn't come from nechassim mishubadim. It's also the part of the promise in the ksuba, but it's also, again, not on a shibud on a karkais. So the Gemara says, so what you obviously see over here is that the arrangement that they made at the time that they set up the marriage, which was verbal, collects from the chasam mishubadim. How do they allow to collect from the chasam mishubadim? Obviously, creating this chov is able to be written down because they can collect from the chasam mishubadim. So the Gemara tries a couple of different angles at rejecting this proof. So the Gemara first wants to say that the husbands did a kinyan. They did a kinyan to create a chiyuv. This is not talking about where it was al peh. They did an actual kinyan to create a chiyuv to support the daughter of their wife. So Gemara says if they did a kinyan, then the same kinyan applies to support their own daughters that they had from another wife. They did a kinyan with their mother as well. So Gemara says no, they didn't do a kinyan with them. So Gemara says why not? Why is the Mishnah assuming that they did a kinyan with this girl's mother and they didn't do a kinyan with their own daughter's mothers? The same thing should apply. So the Gemara says okay, we'll give a different answer, and that is that they made this commitment to their mother while this daughter was already alive. However, their own daughters, they married their mother before she was alive. before the daughter was born, right? They married the mother first. So therefore, any commitment that's made then doesn't work for them. So therefore, the commitment to his wife's daughter, his ex-wife's daughter, there the daughter was alive from a previous marriage, and therefore the commitment works. So the owner's commitment, it doesn't work and doesn't create a shibud. Somebody says, but again, it could be that it does create a shibud. It could be that his daughter was alive. It could be that she divorced her mother and then remarried her. And therefore, at the time of the second marriage, his own daughter was alive already from the first marriage. Now, that's a bit far case, but there's no indication in our Mishnah. We're not talking about that case also. So the Mishnah, I'll give you a third answer, and that's because his own daughter has a Tanai Bezdin that he has to support her. It's part of his guarantees to his wife. It's part of the Kesuba. And therefore, she's not going to get the entitlement of this kinyan that he made. So Gemara says, what do you mean? Because it's a Tanai Bezdin, it's worse? Why should it be worse? So the Gemara explains, no, because this is Tanai Bezdin, he's obligated to pay her, so you would think he already gave her the money. He already set it aside and gave her a bundle to get paid from. And therefore, you can't collect from the Chasam Mishabatim. However, if you have for the other daughter, you could collect from Mishabatim because there's no concern that money was set aside. The Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah, starts a new sugya with one quick halacha that we can learn out of this Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that the daughter is allowed to live by her mother and the husband has to support her there. He can't say she has to come live by him. So you see from this that a girl lives by her mother, and that if, let's say, the father had died, and there's the Yarshim, there's her brothers, and then there's some mother, and they're living separately. She should live with her mother, she should not live with her brothers. And they cannot insist that she come live with them, which is cheaper for them to feed her. So Gemara says, how do you know that that's true here? Maybe the only reason here that she's living with her mother is because she's a ketana, she's a child. And we know that halacha definitely is that a child has to live with her mother and not with her brothers, and that's based on an incident which happened once. Gemara quotes the Brisa. It says there's somebody who died and left over a child, even if it's a boy, should live with his mother and not with his brothers, the Yarshim, because of a case that once happened where they left the child in the home of the brothers and they killed him in order to get his Yerusha. So in order to make sure that's not going to happen, they should not live with him, he should live with his mother. However, if you're talking about a Gedola, an adult, where you don't have that concern, because they can defend themselves, then perhaps they could live with the brother, and therefore even a daughter could live with the brothers. So the Gemara says, if that halacha was true, then the Mishnah should just say that you have to feed her wherever she is. They can't say she has to come live with them. However, it's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says that they should feed her in the house of the mother. So obviously, telling you an extra halacha that the daughter should live with the mother, even if she's a Gedola.